Hey, my name is Nolan Reed. I'm 29, and for the last 5 years I've worked at the Ridgeway Animal Shelter here in Columbus, Ohio, which pays enough to keep the lights on most months and not a whole lot else. My father used to say I inherited his weakness for anything that couldn't ask for help out loud. That weakness was standing in my landlord's office on a Friday afternoon, about to cost me the one thing my father had left me. Walter Doyle had the lease folder open on his desk before I'd even sat down, which told me everything about how this conversation was going to go. He was somewhere past 70, built like a man who'd spent decades fixing other people's furnaces, reading glasses pushed up into gray hair he never got around to combing. He'd known my father for 20 years before the cancer took him, which was the only reason I still had a key to Unit 4C at all. Nolan, he didn't look up from the folder. You're 3 months behind. That's $2,400 I haven't seen. I know, Walter. I've got some of it. Some of it isn't $2,400. He finally looked at me, and there wasn't any anger in it, which somehow made it worse. Just tired. Your dad and I went a long way back, and I've stretched things further for you than I would for anybody else in this building. But I've got my own bills, and the bank doesn't care whose son you are. I felt the floor tilt a little. What are you saying? I'm saying I need this fixed by the 15th in full, or I've got to start the paperwork. He closed the folder like the conversation was already over. 3 weeks. I'm sorry, son. I really am. I don't know exactly why I said what I said next, except that he'd just called me son right before telling me I was about to lose the last piece of my father I had. But the words came out of my mouth before I'd finished thinking them. I'm getting married. Walter's eyebrows went up. You're what? Engaged. She's moving in at the end of the month. Steady income. We'll have the back rent handled and then some. I just need a little time to get everything squared away. I could hear how fast I was talking, how the lie kept growing new limbs the longer I let it run. Walter studied me the way my father used to when I'd claimed to have already fed the dog. That's so. I didn't know you were seeing anybody. The engagement's new. We'd been keeping the two of us quiet a good while before that. Well, he leaned back in his chair. I'd like to meet her. Bring her by before the 15th. Dinner, whatever's easy. And if she's real and you've got a plan, I'll work with you on the back rent. His voice dropped, serious. But if this is a story you're telling me to buy time, you're better off telling me the truth right now. I'll probably still help you. I won't if you lie to my face and I find out later. It's not a story, which was, at that exact moment, the largest lie I had ever told another human being. I walked out of that office feeling like I'd swallowed a stone. I didn't have a fiancé. I had a rescue dog with 3 legs named Duchess, who slept in the shelter's break room because nobody wanted her, and a bank account that made Duchess's adoption odds look generous by comparison. I had 3 weeks to produce a fake fiancé, convincing enough to fool a man who'd known me since I was 7, or lose the last piece of my father I had left. I spent the walk home rehearsing ways to unsay it. I was still running through the options when I reached my door and found a woman standing in the hallway outside 4B, arms crossed, like she'd been waiting for me specifically. I didn't recognize her right away. The building had 6 units, and I mostly knew people by the sound of their footsteps overhead, not their faces. She looked about my age, hair pulled back, a laundry basket balanced on one hip like she'd been interrupted mid-chore. You're the guy in 4C, not a question. That's me. I'm Josie, 4B. She tilted her head toward the wall between our units, which has the thinnest drywall in Franklin County for the record, but that's not actually how I know. I was in the laundry room next to Walter's office an hour ago, and that door doesn't close all the way, so I heard basically everything. He does this thing where he raises his voice at the end of every sentence when he's trying not to yell, and it carries. Heat crawled up the back of my neck. That's mortifying, but I can explain. You don't have to explain it to me. I heard you say it. I'm not judging you for it. She shifted the
A
basket on her hip.
fiancé. I
I
heard you're
heard you're
looking for
looking
one.
for one. I stopped. You're going to have to be specific. A fiancé. She said it like she was reading off a grocery list. I heard you're looking for one. I might be able to help. I stood there holding my keys, waiting for the part where this turned out to be a joke. It wasn't. Josie invited herself into my apartment, which took about 4 seconds to make her opinion of my housekeeping clear, and set the basket down like the conversation deserved both her hands free. I'm not offering because I think you're a catch. She got there before I could say a word. I'm offering because I'm $3,000 behind on rent in the unit next door. My ex-husband is threatening to use it against me in a custody filing, and I have exactly none of the money and all of the desperation required to consider very stupid ideas today. You need a fiancé with steady income Walter can meet before the 15th. I need somewhere stable to put my son that isn't a shelter or my sister's couch in Toledo. If I moved in here on paper as your fiancé, we'd both solve a problem in the same afternoon. I sat down slowly on the arm of my couch. You want to fake marry me? Fake engage. Actually marrying would be a whole separate legal disaster, a ghost of a smile, gone as fast as it came. I'm not asking you to fall in love with me, Nolan. I'm asking you to let me put my name on your lease as a tenant who happens to also be your fiancé, in front of exactly one landlord and possibly one lawyer, until we've both got our feet under us. Then we figure out an exit that doesn't hurt either of us. You have a kid? Something in her face went careful. August. He's 5. Goes by Augie. She watched me like she was gauging whether that fact was a deal breaker. He's quiet with new people. Takes him a while. I thought about Duchess, 3-legged and unwanted in a shelter break room, and about my father, and about the $2,400 I didn't have. I don't even know your last name, Pharaoh. She held out her hand like we were closing a business deal, which I supposed we were. So, are we doing this, or am I going back to my apartment to keep panicking alone? I shook her hand. Her grip was firmer than I expected, like she'd made a habit of not letting people see her hesitate. What's the plan? The plan is you learn my middle name, I learn yours. We agree on a fake proposal story boring enough that nobody asks follow-up questions, and I move a mattress into your spare room for me and a cot in there for Augie by Sunday. She looked around the apartment again, more slowly this time. You have a spare room, right? It's got a treadmill in it that I've used twice. It'll have 2 more bodies in it by Sunday. The treadmill's about to become very popular with whoever wants to sell it. I called Walter that same afternoon. By evening, we'd signed a 1-page temporary occupancy addendum he slid under my door, letting Josie and Augie move in Sunday while he worked out a permanent lease change. We spent the next hour at my kitchen table building the lie like it was a piece of furniture that had to hold real weight. We'd met 8 months ago at the shelter, where Josie had tried to adopt a cat too aggressive to take home, and I'd walked her out to her car feeling sorry for both of us. We got engaged 3 weeks ago, quietly. No ring yet, because I was saving for one Walter would believe. Her middle name was Elaine, after her grandmother. She asked about my mother's name, too, gently, the kind of gentle that told me she already understood what kind of hole a dead parent leaves. I told Deshaun everything the next morning, mostly because I've never once successfully kept a secret from him. He nearly dropped the intake clipboard. You've known this woman for 16 hours, 15. I got her last name at the very end, Nolan. He set the clipboard down. I love you, man, but this is either the dumbest thing you've ever done or the one decision your dad would have been proud of, and I can't tell which yet. Neither can I. Bring the dog around before you bring the kid around. Dog doesn't lie about whether it likes somebody. Not terrible advice from a man who'd once tried to microchip himself for a bet and lost. He tossed me a box of gloves. For what it's worth, Walter's known you since you were a kid. If this woman's half as sharp as you're making her sound, she might actually pull it off. 2 days after Josie and I made the deal, Augie met me, standing half behind Josie's leg in the hallway with a stuffed elephant missing one ear, studying me like I was a strange new species of furniture. "This is Nolan," Josie told him. "He has a dog at his work with 3 legs. Augie's whole face changed. 3? Her name's Duchess. I crouched down to his height, the way I would with a scared shelter animal. No sudden movements, no forcing it. She's the bravest dog I know. Augie considered this with the seriousness of a much older person. Then he held up the elephant. "This is Peanut. He only has 1 ear because our old dog chewed it before Dad said we couldn't have a dog anymore." He considered me a moment longer, then held the elephant out, arm fully extended, like he was daring himself to do it. "You can hold him, if you promise to give him back." I took the elephant with both hands, the way you'd take something worth more than it looked. "I promise." Augie nodded once, satisfied, and reclaimed his post half behind Josie's leg. I glanced at Josie over his head. She gave me a small, tired shake, a request not to ask, not yet. By the time Josie's boxes were stacked in my spare room and Augie had claimed the treadmill as a coat rack, I'd started to notice things I hadn't signed up for. The way she hummed under her breath while unpacking, off-key on purpose to make Augie laugh. The way she never once mentioned Derek Wallace by name, only ever called him his father, like the syllables cost her something. Duchess came home with me the following Tuesday on what I told myself was a 2-week foster trial. Because I am, apparently, exactly as predictable as my father always said I was. The 2 weeks became an open-ended foster agreement by the end of the month, since none of us had any intention of taking her back. Augie met her in the parking lot and dropped to his knees on the asphalt without any hesitation at all, the way kids do with things they've already decided to love. "She's got 3 legs," he informed Josie, solemn, like he was delivering breaking news. "I know, baby," Nolan told us. "She's not sad about it." He said this like it settled something important. Josie caught my eye over his head, and for the first time since she'd knocked on my door, the look on her face wasn't wary. It was something closer to grateful, and it made my chest do something complicated that I didn't have time to examine. The following Saturday, we took Augie and Duchess to the park, mostly because Josie said the apartment was starting to feel like a stage set, and she needed one afternoon that wasn't rehearsal. Augie ran Duchess in slow, patient loops around the same oak tree for the better part of an hour, adjusting his pace to hers, and Josie and I sat on a bench that had definitely seen better decades and watched them like it was the only thing happening in the world. He hasn't asked about a dog in over a year, not since we couldn't afford the last one. Duchess isn't going anywhere. I know, that's the part that scares me a little. She pulled her knees up, wrapped her arms around them, a posture I was starting to recognize as the one she used right before she said something true. Everything good that's happened to us since the divorce has had an expiration date stamped on it somewhere. I keep waiting to find yours. There isn't one. There's always one, Nolan. I just haven't found it yet. I didn't have a clever answer for that, so I didn't invent one. I just laced my fingers through hers on the bench and left them there until Augie came barreling back, Duchess 3-legged and joyful at his heels, demanding to know if dogs could have ice cream too. "Vanilla only. Nothing with chocolate. It's poison to dogs." Augie declared he too would only have vanilla, in solidarity, laughing so hard at his own joke that Josie went quiet a second, watching him, then admitted she hadn't heard that sound out of him since Derek moved out. It was how the 4 of us ended up sharing a scoop on a bench in October, and how I ended up, for the first time in longer than I could remember, forgetting entirely to think about rent. Josie told me the next morning that Augie had slept through the night for the first time in over a year. 3 days later, Duchess had to stay overnight at the vet for a minor procedure, and Augie cried hard enough about it that I drove him over myself just to prove she was fine. By then, Walter's dinner was only 2 days away, and neither of us had rehearsed a single believable answer about our fake engagement yet. We rehearsed in the kitchen at night after Augie went to bed, trading facts like flashcards. Josie worked as a paralegal downtown, mostly contracts, occasionally family law when short-staffed, which she said with a flat little laugh that told me exactly how she felt about the irony of that. She'd married Derek at 23, divorced him at 26, and the nearly 3 years in between had taught her more about disappearing inside someone else's expectations than she wanted to know. I told her about my father, the year of hospital visits, the bills I'd taken on while caring for him, which had outlived him by 18 months and counting. I told her Walter had been the one who drove me to the hospital the night my dad went into the ICU, because my own car didn't run and Walter's did. "That's why he matters to you," Josie said, not a question. "That's why I can't lose the apartment. It's not really about the apartment." She didn't say anything to that, just reached over and refilled my coffee without being asked, and something about the ordinariness of it undid me a little. The dinner arrived faster than either of us was ready for. Walter showed up at 7 sharp in a collared shirt that still had the fold lines from the package, carrying a bottle of wine he'd clearly bought that afternoon at the gas station down the block. Augie had been coached not to mention Josie's bare ring finger since we hadn't found a ring yet, and to otherwise just be a kid, which turned out to be the easiest instruction anybody gave that whole night. Walter asked the questions I'd braced for. "How'd you two meet? What's the wedding timeline? Where's your family from, Josie?" She answered every one of them steady and warm, and somewhere around the second question I stopped being able to tell which parts were rehearsed and which parts were just Josie being Josie, which scared me more than the lie itself did. "He walked me to my car," she told Walter, "after the ugliest gray cat I have ever seen in my life tried to remove my finger. I thought he was just being polite. Turns out he's just built that way." Somewhere between the wine and the deli casserole, Josie slid a folded sheet across the table, her own numbers in neat paralegal columns, her salary, the savings that came from paying 1 rent instead of 2, and, listed separately, the 11 months of support Derek owed that she was actively pursuing, not counting on. "I'm not just a nice story, Mr. Doyle," she said. "I'm also just better at budgets than he is." Walter studied the sheet longer than he needed to, then folded it back along Josie's own crease. "Sounds like his father," Walter said, and something crossed his face, quick and soft, gone before I could name it. "Ted would have liked you." Before he left, he shook my hand at the door and told me the 15th deadline was off the table, that he'd rather see the back rent paid down over the next few months than rushed all at once and done badly. He'd already talked to Josie separately about turning in her key to 4B and rolling what she owed on it into the same arrangement, now that one household only needed to carry 1 unit's rent going forward. He drew up an amended lease that week, listing Josie as a tenant on 4C alongside me. 1 repayment schedule attached, covering both old balances together. $300 total, on top of regular rent, till the whole thing's square, he said. "That's the kind of plan I can work with." After Walter left, Josie stood at the sink for a long moment with her hands still wet, not moving. "He really loved your dad." "Yeah, I felt terrible lying to him." "Me too. I picked up a dish towel because my hands needed something to do. For what it's worth, you weren't lying about all of it." She looked over at me. Which part wasn't a lie? I didn't have an answer ready, so I didn't say anything, and the silence sat there between us doing more talking than either of us wanted it to. Derek showed up 11 days later, on a Tuesday, without calling first, Exactly the kind of thing Josie said he did when he wanted to catch someone unprepared. I was in the parking lot loading Duchess into my car for her follow-up vet checkup when a black SUV pulled in too fast and a man got out wearing the kind of suit that costs more than my monthly rent. "You're Nolan," not a question, sizing me up the way Josie once had, minus the warmth. "I'm Derek, Augie's father. I know who you are." "Then you know I'm not thrilled about my son living with a man his mother barely knows." He glanced past me toward the building. Convenient timing, don't you think? She's about to lose her apartment, and suddenly she's engaged to the guy next door. "It's not like that. I don't actually care what it's like." He smiled, the kind of smile that had probably worked on juries and boardrooms and never once on anyone who really knew him. "I care what it looks like to a family court judge, instability. A live-in stranger my son's known for a matter of weeks. I've already filed for a hearing." Josie came out then, Augie's hand in hers, and went very still when she saw the SUV. "Derek, you can't just show up. I can when it concerns my son's living situation." He crouched down, all warmth now, a different face entirely. "Hey buddy, you having fun with the new dog?" Augie pressed himself against Josie's leg and didn't answer. Derek's jaw tightened, just barely, and I understood in that moment that his son's silence bothered him more than anything Josie could have said. "We'll talk through the lawyers," Josie said, voice tight but level. "Get off the property, Derek." He straightened up, buttoned his jacket like he was closing a meeting. "The hearing's in 3 weeks. Bring your fiancé if he's really that. Judges like consistency." He got back in the SUV and pulled away too fast, same as he'd arrived. Josie didn't move for a long moment. Then she looked at me. "I'm sorry. You didn't sign up for a custody war." "I signed up for whatever this is the day you knocked on my door." I meant it as something light, a way to loosen the tension in her shoulders, but her eyes went bright and wet in a way that told me it had landed somewhere heavier than I'd intended. Josie's friend Marisol showed up within the hour, in scrubs from a shift she hadn't technically finished, hugged Josie hard enough that I heard her spine crack, then looked at me like she was noticing me for the first time. "And who's this?" "This is Nolan," Josie said. "My fiancé." The word landed strange in the room, half a lie and half something neither of us had named yet. Marisol pulled Josie into the kitchen for a conversation I heard most of anyway. "You met him 3 weeks ago, Joe. He built Augie a bookshelf out of milk crates, the same week Augie mentioned wanting one. Nobody asked him to. He just did it." A pause, quieter. "Okay, but I want to actually meet him, not just glare at him over your shoulder." When they came back into the living room, Marisol shook my hand like she was testing its structural integrity and told me, without a trace of a smile, that she'd be watching. I decided, on balance, that I liked her. That night, after Augie was asleep and Duchess asleep in the middle of the couch, Josie sat across from me at the kitchen table with a legal pad covered in notes about the hearing. "He's not going to win," mostly to herself. "He doesn't want more time with Augie. He wants leverage, so I'll stop asking him to pay what he owes. It's a chess move, not a father wanting his son." "Then why does it scare you?" She was quiet for a while. "Because judges don't always see the chess move. They just see a single mom behind on rent, moving a man she'd known only a few weeks into her child's life. It doesn't matter that the strange man turned a room that used to hold nothing but an unused treadmill into an actual bedroom for us, or that my kid asked to sleep with the dog last night, and you said yes without even checking with me first. You're mad about the dog thing." "I'm not mad about the dog thing." A small, unwilling laugh escaped her, the same kind of laugh I was starting to recognize as the sound she made right before she let her guard down a little. "I'm terrified, actually, and you're the only person I've let see that in about 2 years. which is either a very good sign or a very bad one, and I genuinely don't know which. I reached across the table and covered her hand with mine, the way I did with animals too scared to be touched yet, slow enough that she could pull away if she needed to. She didn't, for what it's worth, I offered. I don't think this is fake anymore. Not on my end. She looked up at me, something unguarded moving across her face before she could stop it. Nolan, you don't have to say anything back. I just didn't want to keep pretending I didn't mean it when I said the treadmill thing. A laugh broke through the tears this time, real and surprised out of her. That's the least romantic confession I've ever heard. I work at an animal shelter. Romance isn't really my department. She turned her hand over under mine, so our palms met properly. And for a long moment, neither of us said anything at all, because some things don't need narrating. They just need to be allowed to happen. The hearing crept closer the way bad weather does, visible for days before it actually hits. Josie's lawyer, a sharp, tired woman named Priya from Josie's firm, warned us Derek's attorney would paint the engagement as staged, timed to influence the custody outcome. The best defense against that, Priya said, is showing up like people who actually live a life together, not like people who rehearsed one. That promise got tested more than once in the weeks that followed. More than a week before the hearing, Priya called with news that made my stomach drop. Derek's attorney had subpoenaed the shelter's employment records, hoping to find something that would paint the whole household as built on sand. There wasn't anything damaging in 5 years of records, but the shelter's director, a woman named Carla, who took HR compliance approximately as seriously as a heart attack, called me into her office looking like she'd rather be anywhere else. "We received a subpoena for your file. Our counsel is handling it. They'll turn over what's legally required and object to anything outside its scope, so don't worry about the paperwork end. But I wanted you to hear about it from me before you heard it from someone less kind." "Thank you." "Nolan," she hesitated. "Is everything okay? This isn't like you." I told her most of it, the parts that weren't Josie's to keep private. And Carla listened with her arms crossed until I finished, then finally spoke. "You know, when your dad worked maintenance here, before you were even hired, he used to say the shelter dogs could smell a liar from across the parking lot. Said it was the only hiring criteria that actually mattered. Is that a yes or a no?" My answer is that I've watched you carry Duchess up 2 flights during a thunderstorm because she was too scared to walk them. I don't think you're capable of faking anything that matters, Nolan Reed. I think you're just bad at admitting when the fake thing turned real. She waved me toward the door. "Go home. Kiss your fiancé. The real kind, not the rehearsed one." I didn't ask how she knew there'd been a rehearsed one. I suspected the whole building had known before I did. 4 days before the hearing, Walter ended up standing in my kitchen at 8 in the morning holding a toolbox, because I'd mentioned offhand that the spare room's closet door had been hanging crooked since before Josie moved in. And Walter apparently couldn't hear about a crooked door without fixing it himself. "Your dad taught me that trick," he said, adjusting the hinge while Augie handed him screws with the gravity of a surgical assistant. "Said a door that doesn't hang right is a door somebody gave up on too early." He glanced at me. Same could be said for a lot of things. I didn't ask him to clarify. I think we both knew he wasn't only talking about the door. 2 days before the hearing, it hit Josie all at once how little time was left, and it sent her into a cleaning spiral so intense she alphabetized the spice rack, a shelf I hadn't known existed until that morning. I found her at midnight scrubbing a baseboard that was already clean. "Josie, if a judge walks through that door and sees one thing out of place, he'll use it. Nobody's walking through that door tonight, and there's nothing to find anyway. You live here, Augie lives here, I live here. Duchess sleeps on a bed that cost more than my last 3 grocery runs combined. This isn't staged, it's just what our life looks like now." She sat back on her heels, sponge still in hand, and looked at me for a long moment, like she was really seeing the sentence I'd just said. "Our life," she repeated, quiet. "Yeah, you said our life." "I did." She set the sponge down slowly. "I think I've been so scared of losing Augie that I forgot to notice I might actually be building something real in the meantime. You're allowed to notice both at once. Am I allowed to kiss you at midnight over a baseboard, or is that against some rule I haven't read yet? Pretty sure the fake Fiancée handbook is silent on baseboards." She kissed me before I finished the sentence, sponged still damp in her hand, and it didn't feel like two people closing a business deal anymore. It felt like the first true thing either of us had said out loud in weeks. The night before the hearing, Josie and I sat Walter down and told him everything, start to finish. He went quiet, jaw tight. I braced for him to take it all back. I had my suspicions. Another quiet moment. "I meant what I said. It cost you my trust, and that doesn't just come back. But the payment plan was always built on real income and one household, not on the story you gave me." That part was true from the start. I'm not putting a 5-year-old out to prove a point. I'll testify to what I've actually seen, nothing more. Priya's strategy going in was simple. "Don't defend a story," she told us. "Tell the truth about how this started, plainly, before anyone can use it as a weapon. Judges trust people who do not perform." She had also filed a counter motion weeks earlier to establish and collect the arrears accumulating on Derek's support, scheduled for the same session as his motion for temporary orders. This wasn't the full custody trial, just an expedited hearing on whether anything had changed enough to disrupt Augie's home before a fuller hearing could be scheduled. The room was on the 4th floor of the county building, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. Derek's attorney called him first. He was sworn in, painted the picture we'd expected under his own lawyer's gentle questioning about his concerns. A whirlwind engagement, a household built out of desperation instead of commitment. Priya's cross-examination was quieter than I expected, almost gentle, which somehow made it land harder. She asked when he'd last attended one of Augie's school events. She walked him through the missed payments, plus the one that had come due since the filing, entered as plainly as a grocery receipt. She asked whether his concern for stability had started before or after Josie stopped taking his calls about the money. Then Priya called Josie. After the bailiff swore her in, Priya let her tell it herself before Derek's attorney ever got the chance. The engagement started because Nolan's landlord was about to start eviction proceedings, and a woman he barely knew offered to help instead of watching him lose everything, Josie said. "I'm not asking this court to treat that engagement as proof of anything. It was a label we invented to buy time with our landlord, and kept using longer than we should have, because the truth felt dangerous once other people believed it too. It wasn't true when we first said it. What's true is the household we've built since, whatever we end up calling it." When Derek's attorney rose to cross-examine, she reached for the obvious opening. "So you'd agree it began as a transaction?" "I'd agree it began as two people trying not to drown. I don't think that's a crime. I think that's most relationships, if people are honest enough to admit where they started." She did not stop there. "My son has known Nolan 6 weeks, long enough that he cried the first time our dog stayed overnight at the vet, because he was scared she wasn't coming home. Long enough that he calls his bookshelf the Nolan shelf, because Nolan built it out of milk crates, the same week Augie mentioned wanting somewhere to put his stuffed elephant so it wouldn't get stepped on. I know how the timeline looks, but my son has slept through the night for the first time in a year, and he laughs now, in a way he stopped doing around the time his father moved out." The attorney had no follow-up for that. Neither really did the room. Then Priya called Walter, who walked in wearing the same collared shirt from dinner. Sworn in, he talked about the back rent, about how close I'd come to losing the apartment, and about the woman who'd shown up at his table and answered every question steady, whatever had or hadn't been rehearsed beforehand. Whatever this started as, and by now I know exactly what it started as, isn't really my business, he said. What I know is what I've watched over the last 6 weeks. A stable household. A kid who stood beside me handing me screws like it was his job while I fixed that closet door. I've been renting to families for 30 years. I know the difference between people performing a life and people living one. And this stopped being a performance a while back. Then Priya called me last. After the bailiff swore me in, she asked why I'd agreed to let Josie and Augie move in. I hadn't rehearsed an answer, which turned out to be the best thing that could have happened. Because she knocked on my door on the worst day of my year and offered to help a stranger instead of walking past him. And because 2 days later, her son handed me a stuffed elephant with one ear and told me I could hold it if I promised to give it back. I don't know how to explain what that did to me, except to say I've been trying to earn that kind of trust from people my whole life, and it took a 5-year-old about 10 minutes to just give it to me. The judge did not rule that day. 3 days later, Priya called with the news. No qualifying change in circumstances sufficient to disrupt custody. No evidence Augie's home was anything but stable, and a formal finding that Derek was in default, with the full arrearage placed on a court-monitored repayment schedule. Josie cried in the kitchen when she got off the phone, and Augie, alarmed, ran to get Duchess, apparently under the impression that a 3-legged dog could fix anything, which, in fairness, she mostly could. 2 weeks later, Derek withdrew the underlying custody modification motion through his attorney. Walter waived the late fees and knocked a few hundred more off the balance around the same time, calling it, with a straight face, a finder's fee for introducing me to somebody your father would have been proud of. I used to think love was supposed to announce itself, some obvious lightning strike moment you'd recognize the second it happened. I've learned since that it can also show up disguised as a lie you told to save your apartment, and grow slowly, quietly, in the space between a crooked door and a stuffed elephant with one ear, until one day you look up and realize the thing you built to survive the month has become the thing you actually live for. 6 months after that first knock in the hallway, Josie and I stood in the shelter parking lot on a Saturday morning and signed the official adoption agreement for Duchess. Augie filling out his own ceremonial copy alongside us, handwriting wandering outside the lines, because a dog that brave deserved a family that made it official. Josie slipped her hand into mine while we watched him work, wearing the ring I'd actually given her 3 months earlier, on our kitchen floor of all places, both of us laughing too hard to get through a real speech while Duchess barked at the commotion like she had opinions too. The ring was small and simple, exactly right for her, and exactly what we could afford. "Nervous?" she asked, nodding at Augie's fierce concentration. "About the dog, no," I looked at her. "About the rest of it, every single day, in the best way I know how to mean that." Augie finished the last line with a flourish and held the clipboard up over his head like a trophy. "She's ours now," he announced to the whole parking lot. "Official and everything." Josie laughed, bright and unguarded, the sound I'd started to recognize as the truest one she had. "Yeah, baby," she said, pulling us both in. "She really is." We kept paying $300 total each month toward what was left of the arrears, and it took close to a year and a half before the balance finally hit zero. Walter still comes by some Sundays with his toolbox, even though nothing's broken anymore, and Augie has started saving him the good donut before anyone else gets to the box.